In September 2024, the apartment adjacent to mine was leased to two young women, both attending university. After they moved in and settled, they decided to host a party. Typically, this wouldn't be an issue, but we were still contending with post-pandemic restrictions in our neighborhood due to a new variant, and gatherings were limited to small groups. However, young people tend to act naturally, so I tried not to make a big deal out of it. During this period, I was employed in healthcare, working with individuals with mental disabilities. I had volunteered for the specialized care unit, meaning I was in charge of residents who required extra attention or were isolated due to illness. My shifts were lengthy, usually 10 to 11 hours, plus a full hour of biking to and from work. I was perpetually tired, so the idea of party noise wasn't exactly appealing, but I consider myself quite easygoing and accept that city living entails some noise. Their party ended up being completely out of control. People were shouting in the hallway and causing damage. Around 4 a.m., I knocked on their door. "Hello, I'm Megan from next door," I said, attempting to keep my voice steady despite my fatigue. "I hate to be that neighbor, but when do you think your guests might be leaving? There must be at least 20 people inside." "Oh my God, we're so sorry," said Ava, one of the women. "We'll wrap it up soon, promise?" "Thanks, I appreciate it. And please, no parties tomorrow. I have to be up at 6 a.m. for work." "Of course not. We totally understand," said her roommate Zoe. They didn't keep either promise. The party continued until dawn, and they threw another one the next night, and the night after that. After 3 sleepless nights, I was losing my patience. Each night I'd try talking to them. "Listen, girls, I really need to sleep. I work with vulnerable people and I can't function like this." "We're really sorry," they'd respond, appearing genuinely remorseful. It won't happen again. But it always did. I felt especially uneasy entering their crowded apartment given my work with high-risk patients. This was still a time of uncertainty about new variants, and precautions were essential. Finally, the weekend arrived, and they left for their parents' homes, giving me a chance to recover. The major parties ceased for a few weeks, but then something even more irritating began. Their apartment became a revolving door of visitors all night long. The doorbell would ring incessantly. I counted over 70 rings one night. Intoxicated individuals staggered through our stone-walled hallway, their voices echoing throughout the building. One night, while heading to complain again, I met my upstairs neighbor, Jake. "You're dealing with this too?" he asked. "Every single night," I replied. "I know what's really going on," Jake said. "They're running an unofficial bar out of their apartment. With the new restrictions on nightlife, students are using it as a hangout spot. There's another place across the street, a fraternity house with 5 guys doing the same thing." The pieces started to fit together. The constant stream of people, mostly law students, was moving between these 2 makeshift bars. Our hallway had become part of their social circuit. We tried reasoning with everyone involved. I caught some visitors in the hallway at 4 a.m. "Hey guys, people are trying to sleep here?" "Whatever, lady," one drunk student laughed. "Not our problem. The police were called repeatedly, but the students wouldn't open their doors. The officers told us they couldn't do anything without being let in." Frustrated with the police's inability to help, I decided to use my social work skills to find another solution. After contacting various organizations without success, Jake suggested reaching out to their faculty dean. I composed a carefully worded email. "Dear Dean Thompson, I apologize for contacting you directly, but we have a serious situation involving law students that requires attention. With the current health restrictions, their activities are putting many at risk, and we're considering taking this to the media." The dean called me within hours. "This is deeply concerning," he said. "I'll handle it immediately." He contacted Ava, the law student, and her parents. This led to a meeting where the girls finally showed genuine remorse. "We had no idea it was affecting you this badly," Ava said through tears. "Really?" I replied, trying to maintain my composure. "You got several $300 fines from the police and kept going, and you're complaining about the dean calling at 11 a.m. because you were sleeping?" "We're really sorry," Zoe mumbled. "That's the problem," I explained. "You're sleeping at 11 a.m. while I'm up at 6 a.m. every day. There's been zero consideration for others. We thought the issue was resolved, but they simply moved their operations to the fraternity house across the street. The traffic decreased slightly, but the noise continued, and the gatherings were still happening during a time when new variant cases were spiking. Jake had captured video footage of one of their parties. We debated going to the media and decided to test public opinion by posting the clip on our local subreddit. The response was overwhelming. "These entitled kids need to be held accountable," one comment read. "Healthcare workers deserve better," said another. We contacted both the press and Dr. Lawson, the university's vice rector for student affairs. Things escalated quickly after that. A local news outlet picked up the story from Reddit. "Healthcare worker tormented by illegal student parties" made headlines across national news sites. The police confirmed our numerous complaints, and the university's involvement was mentioned. "This has gone beyond just noise complaints," I told the reporter. "It's about public health and basic respect." The story exploded. The next day, Jake messaged me, "There's a national news crew outside." The coverage peaked when one of the fraternity members gave an interview, essentially confessing, "Yeah, we have parties. When the cops come, we just don't answer. What's the big deal?" After the media storm, we had another meeting with Ava and Zoe. This time was different. "We really messed up," Ava admitted. "We never thought it would go this far. All we wanted was for you to be considerate neighbors." I responded, "The university's disciplinary committee was lenient with the girls after we put in a good word. They received 40 hours of community service and probation." The fraternity members got 80 hours each and had to write apology letters. One letter read, "I never considered how our actions affected others. I was just thinking about having fun." For the rest of the year, a simple WhatsApp message was enough to quiet any noise. "Hey, could you keep it down?" The experience taught me that even the most patient person has limits. It also showed these students that actions have consequences, even if it took national media attention to drive that point home. Looking back, I wish it hadn't required such extreme measures. Some noise is normal in city living, and we never wanted this level of escalation. But when pushed to our limits by sleep deprivation and complete disregard for others, even the most easygoing people will eventually push back. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought I'd be writing one of these stories, but here we are. This all started about 8 months ago when I began having issues with delivery trucks blocking access to my workshop. For context, I'm a woodworker who runs a small custom furniture business from my workshop, which is located in a mixed residential commercial development. I bought this property specifically because it had proper zoning for both residential and light commercial use. The workshop is separate from my house with its own dedicated parking lot that can fit about 6 or 7 vehicles. This is crucial because I often need to load and unload large pieces of furniture, raw materials, and sometimes have clients come by to check on their custom pieces. The development has a homeowner association, which I thoroughly researched before buying. The CC&Rs clearly stated that my lot was zoned for light commercial use, and I made sure to get everything in writing about my rights to operate my business. I've been here for 5 years without any major issues until the new homeowner association board took over last year. The problem started when I noticed delivery vans and trucks regularly parking in my lot. At first, it was just 1 or 2 vehicles occasionally, which was annoying but manageable. I'd find them there in the morning when I arrived to work, usually blocking the main entrance to my workshop. I tried being reasonable about it. The first few times, I tracked down the drivers and politely explained that this was private property and they couldn't park here. Most apologized and moved, but they'd be back the next day, or different delivery vehicles would take their place. After about 2 weeks of this, I decided to investigate why this was suddenly happening. Turns out our new homeowner association board had made a deal with several delivery companies to use various parking spaces throughout the development as temporary staging areas for their delivery routes. They were charging these companies a fee for the privilege. I immediately called Emily Davis, our homeowner association president, to discuss the issue. "Hello, this is Emily," she answered in that condescending tone I'd come to know well from our previous interactions. "Hi, Emily. This is Daniel Brooks from Lot 47. I'm calling about the delivery trucks using my workshop parking lot." Oh yes, we've implemented a new community revenue generation program. The funds will go towards improving our neighborhood amenities. I took a deep breath. Emily, you can't rent out my private parking lot. It's not homeowner association property. She laughed dismissively. All exterior areas fall under homeowner association jurisdiction, Mr. Brooks. We've reviewed the bylaws thoroughly. That's incorrect. My lot is specifically zoned for commercial use, and I have documentation proving it's my private property. You need to tell these delivery companies to stop using my lot immediately. I'm afraid that won't be possible. The contracts are already signed, and this program is bringing in significant revenue for the community. Perhaps we could discuss a small percentage being allocated to you as compensation? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm not interested in compensation. I need my entire lot available for my business. Please remove my property from your rental program immediately. Mr. Brooks, you're being rather difficult about this. The community's needs should take precedence over your little hobby workshop. That really got under my skin. This isn't a hobby, Emily. It's my livelihood. I'll be sending you a formal letter demanding you cease using my property. If this continues, I'll have no choice but to take legal action. Are you threatening me? She asked, her voice getting sharp. I'm informing you of my rights as a property owner. Please deal with this situation promptly. I hung up and immediately called my attorney, Michael Reed. He'd helped me review all the paperwork when I bought the property, so he was familiar with my situation. After explaining everything, he agreed to draft a cease and desist letter. The letter was delivered to the Homeowner Association Board the next day, but nothing changed. If anything, there seemed to be more delivery vehicles than before. I documented everything with photos and videos, including timestamps showing how long the vehicles were staying there. One morning, I arrived to find 3 delivery vans completely blocking access to my workshop. I had a large dining table set to be delivered that day, and my client was coming to pick it up personally. I couldn't even get into my own business. That was the last straw. I called the towing company I had already researched and arranged to have on standby. City Towing, how can we help you? Hi, this is Daniel Brooks. I need to have 3 vehicles towed from my private property at 1247 Oak Street, Lot 47. We'll be there in about 20 minutes. Please have your property ownership documentation ready. I had everything prepared. Within half an hour, all 3 vans were being hooked up to tow trucks. That's when the real drama started. Just as the last van was being hooked up, Emily came storming across the parking lot, her face red with anger. Behind her were 2 other homeowner association board members and a man in a suit who I assumed was representing the delivery companies. What do you think you're doing? Emily practically screamed. You can't tow these vehicles. They have permission to be here. I stayed calm, knowing I was in the right. They have your permission, not mine. This is private property, and I've warned you multiple times. The man in the suit stepped forward. I'm Robert Hughes, legal counsel for Metro Delivery Services. We have a contract with the Homeowner Association for use of this space. I handed him my property deed and the relevant zoning documents. Then your contract is with the wrong party. This is my private property, not Homeowner Association common area. I suggest you take it up with them. Robert reviewed the documents, his expression darkening. He turned to Emily. You told us you had authority to lease these spaces. Emily's face went from red to pale. The Homeowner Association has jurisdiction over all exterior areas in the development. It's in the bylaws. Not for commercially zoned private lots, I corrected her. As you've been informed multiple times. The first tow truck started pulling away with one of the vans. Emily tried to step in front of the second one, but the driver just waited patiently. This is going to cost thousands in impound fees, she protested. You can't do this. Actually, I can and I am. I've documented weeks of warnings to you and the delivery companies. I've lost business because of this situation. Robert was still reading through my documentation. Miss Davis, we need to talk. Now. His tone made it clear he wasn't happy about being misled. Over the next few hours, my phone blew up with calls and texts from other homeowner association board members and angry delivery company representatives. I directed them all to my lawyer. Meanwhile, I was finally able to get my client's dining table loaded and delivered, though several hours behind schedule. That evening, I received an email from the Homeowner Association Board demanding I attend an emergency meeting the next day. I forwarded it to my lawyer, who agreed to accompany me. The meeting was held in our community center, and it was packed. Word had spread about the towing incident, and residents wanted to know what was going on. Emily tried to paint me as the villain who was costing the community valuable revenue, but my lawyer quickly shut that down. My client has documented evidence of multiple warnings about this illegal use of his property, Michael explained to the assembled residents. The Homeowner Association Board entered into contracts they had no authority to make, misrepresenting their control over private property. This has resulted in significant business disruption for my client. One of the residents, Leo Chen, raised his hand. How much did these contracts bring in? Emily shuffled some papers. The delivery company agreements would have generated $72,000 annually for the community. Would have? Another resident asked. The delivery companies have canceled all contracts after today's incident, Emily admitted reluctantly. They're also demanding repayment of their initial fees. The room erupted in angry murmurs. Another resident stood up. So, not only did you illegally rent out private property, but now we're going to have to pay back money you shouldn't have taken in the first place? My lawyer cleared his throat. Additionally, my client will be seeking compensation for lost business revenue and filing a civil suit for trespassing and interference with business operations. Emily tried to regain control of the meeting. This is exactly why we need to change the bylaws regarding commercial properties in our development. Mr. Brooks' business is disrupting our community's potential. She was cut off by another resident, Mrs. Thompson, who owned a small bakery in another part of the development. Are you planning to rent out my parking spaces too? This is completely unacceptable. The meeting devolved into chaos after that. Several residents called for the board's resignation, while others demanded to see all contracts the board had entered into. I sat quietly, letting my lawyer handle any questions directed at me. The next day, I filed my lawsuit against the Homeowner Association. The delivery companies filed their own suits for fraudulent misrepresentation. It was about to get very expensive for the Homeowner Association. The legal proceedings that followed were both fascinating and frustrating. My lawyer advised me to keep detailed records of every business interruption and loss caused by the parking situation. I installed security cameras to document any continuing violations, though the delivery trucks had stopped coming after the towing incident. The Homeowner Association's insurance company got involved, and things got interesting. During discovery, we found out that Emily and 2 other board members had actually created a separate LLC to manage the parking rental program. They were skimming 30% of the fees for administrative costs before the money ever reached the Homeowner Association accounts. One morning, about 3 weeks into the legal battle, I arrived at my workshop to find Emily's husband, Brian, waiting for me. "Look, Daniel," he said, trying to sound reasonable. "This has gotten out of hand. Can't we work something out? Emily was just trying to help the community." I shook my head. By illegally renting out my property and pocketing part of the money? That's not helping the community, Brian. "It wasn't illegal," he insisted. "The bylaws." "Save it for court," I interrupted. "Everything you need to know is in the documentation my lawyer provided. And speaking of documentation, this conversation is being recorded by my security cameras." He left quickly after that, but the intimidation attempts didn't stop there. Several board members started spreading rumors that my business was violating noise ordinances and environmental regulations. They even sent out a community newsletter suggesting that having industrial activities in the neighborhood was lowering property values. That backfired spectacularly when Mrs. Thompson, the baker, organized a meeting of all the small business owners in the development. There were 12 of us in total, including a dentist, a pediatrician, and several other service-based businesses. We all had similar stories about the new board's attempts to extract money from us in various ways. Dr. Allen, the pediatrician, had been pressured to pay extra commercial use fees that weren't in the bylaws. The dentist, Dr. Lee, had been threatened with fines for his patients parking in his designated spaces. Mrs. Thompson had been told she needed special permits from the Homeowner Association at $500 each to accept delivery of baking supplies. We formed an alliance and hired a specialized homeowner association attorney to review everything the board had done since taking office. What she found was shocking. They've been operating like a protection racket, our attorney, Ms. Ramirez, explained during a group meeting. Creating fake fees, inventing regulations, and threatening fines that aren't supported by the bylaws. This goes way beyond just the parking issue. The evidence was damning. The board had collected over $180,000 in invalid fees and fines over just 8 months. Their LLC had taken around $54,000 of that as their cut. Meanwhile, my case was moving forward. The delivery company settled with me directly, paying for the towing fees and some additional compensation for business disruption. They then added those amounts to their own lawsuits against the homeowner association. The turning point came during a deposition when Emily cracked under questioning about the LLC's finances. She admitted that they had known they didn't have authority over the private commercial lots, but thought they could pressure us into compliance through fines and threats. We were just trying to maximize community revenue, she insisted, breaking down in tears. The previous board left us with budget shortfalls, and we needed to find new income sources. By stealing from legitimate business owners? Ms. Ramirez asked. It wasn't stealing. We were redistributing resources for the greater good of the community, she retorted. That deposition transcript, when circulated to the homeowners, led to an emergency community meeting. The room was packed with people standing along the walls. The homeowner association's insurance company's lawyer stood up first. The insurance policy doesn't cover intentional fraudulent acts by board members. The homeowner association itself will be liable for any judgments or settlements. That got everyone's attention. If the homeowner association had to pay, it meant every homeowner would have to pay through special assessments. The meeting erupted into chaos. Homeowners were shouting at Emily and the other board members, demanding to know how much this would cost them personally. Based on current claims, the insurance lawyer explained, we're looking at potential liability exceeding $400,000, not including legal fees and punitive damages. A resident quickly did the math. That's over $2,000 per household. Actually, Ms. Ramirez interjected, the commercial property owners have agreed to a much smaller settlement provided certain conditions are met. The room went silent. Everyone waited for her to continue. First, the entire board must resign immediately. Second, all illegally collected fees must be refunded. Third, the LLC must be dissolved and its profits returned. Fourth, new bylaws must be adopted that explicitly protect commercial property owners' rights. And finally, the board members involved must be personally responsible for all legal fees. Emily jumped up. You can't make us personally responsible. We were acting as board members. You were acting as private business owners through your LLC, Ms. Ramirez corrected her. That pierces any immunity you might have had as board members. The vote to accept our terms was nearly unanimous. Only Emily and her immediate supporters voted against it. The board was forced to resign that night, and an interim board was elected from homeowners who had no connection to the previous administration. During the transition, we discovered even more irregularities. Emily and her fellow board members had been using homeowner association maintenance funds to improve their own properties while ignoring common areas. They had hired family members for overpriced contracts. They had even been using homeowner association funds to pay for their personal cell phones and internet service. The final settlement was signed 2 months later. In addition to our original terms, we added requirements for annual audits and restrictions on board members doing business with the homeowner association. Emily, Brian, and the other involved board members had to pay over $85,000 in legal fees from their personal funds. But the real justice came from an unexpected source. Remember Robert Hughes, the delivery company's lawyer? He had been building a case for criminal fraud. About a week after our settlement, Emily and 2 other former board members were arrested for wire fraud and embezzlement. The local news covered the arrests. I'll never forget seeing Emily being led out of her house in handcuffs, still insisting she had done nothing wrong. Brian tried to block the news cameras, which only made for more dramatic footage. The criminal case ended with plea deals. Emily and her accomplices got probation and had to pay additional restitution. But more importantly, They were barred from serving on any homeowner association board or handling other people's money in any capacity. The aftermath brought some positive changes to our community. The new board, led by Mrs. Thompson, focused on transparency and fairness. They created a business owners advisory committee to ensure commercial properties' interests were represented. They even started an annual community business fair to showcase local enterprises. My workshop actually benefited from all the publicity. Once people heard about the case, many wanted to support local businesses. I got several new clients who came specifically because they had read about the situation. Mrs. Thompson's bakery experienced similar support, and soon our little business district was thriving. Last week, I saw Brian loading a moving truck. Emily's legal troubles and the community's reaction had made living here uncomfortable for them. As I watched them drive away, I felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. While I never wanted to drive anyone from their home, their actions had hurt many people and could have destroyed several small businesses. The new homeowner association board recently installed a small business directory at the community entrance, highlighting all the local enterprises that make our development unique. My workshop is listed right there alongside Mrs. Thompson's bakery, Dr. Allen's pediatric practice, and all the other businesses that fought back against corruption. Looking back, I'm glad I stood my ground. It would have been easier to give in or move my business, but sometimes you have to fight for what's right. The delivery trucks never returned to my lot, and now I have plenty of space for my clients' cars and my supply deliveries. As for the $72,000 in parking rental fees the homeowner association lost, the new board made it up through proper management and legitimate fundraising events. Turns out you don't need to steal from your neighbors to run a successful community. Mrs. Thompson stops by my workshop occasionally with fresh pastries, and we laugh about how attempting to block my parking lot led to the exposure of an entire criminal enterprise. You know, she said recently, sometimes the best revenge is just standing up for what's right and letting justice take its course. I couldn't agree more. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a dining room set to finish for a new client who coincidentally heard about my work through the Homeowner Association scandal news coverage. Sometimes karma works in mysterious ways. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.